Guys, it's Aoife from Words of Clover and I am here to do my favourites of 2020 so far. I did mention it in my reading rush vlog, which should be up before this video, but obviously I am in front of a new bookshelf. I moved recently just a couple of weeks ago and I don't have all of my books with me at the moment. I'm still waiting for at least another suitcase of books and I'll be able to fill up these shelves very soon, and that'll be exciting, and soon these will be full of all my normal kind of books. I have 10 books on my list so far for my favourite books, and these are all books that I really enjoyed, and even looking back at them and trying to make this list, I was able to remember a lot of them really clearly, which is always really helpful when doing a little recap and explaining why I love them so much. So I'm going to go straight on into it and let you know the books. So the first book I want to talk about is Climate Justice by Mary Robinson. I read this near the very start of the year, I think. I can't remember if I read it in early March or around February time. But this is obviously a book by Mary Robinson, who was the former president of Ireland, and she basically has compiled this book, and it's all about different stories of people who have been affected by climate change, and she's basically using this book to tell their stories. And Mary Robinson more or less kind of says that climate change isn't just an environmental issue, but it's a human rights issue, and the people who are most affected by climate change are people who are in kind of third world countries, mainly people of colour, mainly women of colour. And she basically tells these stories, and kind of each chapter is dedicated to a specific person who has kind of been affected by climate change and has started to make kind of simple changes in their community, or have done certain things to try and combat climate change, to try and educate others around them. And it's just really interesting, and I really love that this book did give a voice to people that you might not necessarily hear about, and voices to people who need to be heard, like when you're talking about this issue. Very easy for us who are living in countries that mainly are actually doing the most damage to the environment, and forget about the people who are living in countries that are actually probably doing the most they can in terms of being environmentally friendly, yet no matter what they do, they are getting the adverse effects of climate change because of bigger countries, and because bigger countries aren't doing enough. And I really enjoy this. This is one I actually definitely need to get my own copy of, because there are certain stories in this that I would love to go back on. The Dilemma by B.A. Paris is a kind of suspense thriller novel, or a suspense drama novel that I really enjoy this year. I've really enjoyed most of B.A. Paris's novels, and I think she just writes a really great, really fast-paced, intense, engrossing reads. And I love that B.A. Paris is someone I know that when I'm reading one of her books, it's one of those books that I would sit down and I could possibly read in one sitting. They're just so fast to read, you just cannot look away, and this was definitely the case with the Dilemma for me. And one of the reasons I think I like this one so much, because this one I have seen other people haven't liked it because they felt that it was very boring, where this one is just, it's very kind of almost this like normal, you're kind of seeing these two people who are in this marriage, and they're both keeping secrets from each other, and they're both kind of massive secrets, and one of them is really tragic, and you see they're struggling to kind of tell each other about this secret. And there's definitely this thing of like a lot of communication issues, so if you're really someone who does not like communication issues in a book, this definitely is not for you. But the way they circle around each other for the entire book, and it's all centered around this party as well, and they're kind of circling around each other about this party, and they're just not telling each other this secret, and both secrets are about their daughter. And it's so annoying, but it's also just, there's so much tension in this book that I was on the edge of my seat when I was reading it. Since I think I really enjoyed this as well is because I kept imagining it as a stage show, and I just think it would be really great if it was adapted to be a stage adaptation, because I think you could have it all on one stage. It's all centered around this party in this one house, and you could have the stage separated into rooms, and I just think it would be really cool. And I'd love for someone who was like an actual script writer, if they were able to write this to be a play on stage, it would be so good, and I would definitely go and see it. A Court of Mist and Fury is definitely one of my favourite books this year. I did a whole video review on this book because I enjoy it so much. I just loved where Sarah J Maas brought her characters in this one. I loved the fact that there was a lot of emphasis on PTSD in this book, as well as manipulating relationships and the danger of those and how you can get trapped in them. I just love the romance, I love the angst, I just love the side characters that were introduced in this book as well, and I just loved how it brought the story forward. I still haven't read the next book, which I think is A Court of Wings and Ruin, and to be honest, I'm a little bit scared of reading it, because I feel like Sarah J Maas has this thing with her books where she just kind of can like make things like some really crazy things happen, and she can really turn her characters and make them completely flip in terms of what you know about them, and they become like completely different people, and their personalities can completely change from one book to another. All the Best Lies by Joanna Schaffhausen did not let me down this year, just as the other two books in the Ellery Hathaway series didn't let me down either. These books have all been some of my favourite books of the last few years, and this is just a brilliant crime series with a really good duo. We are following a detective called, or police officer called Ellery Hathaway, and a kind of FBI profiler called Reed Markham, and the two of them have this history from the time when Ellery was a child and she was actually abducted by a serial killer, and Reed was the police officer. He was a very young police officer at the time, and he was the one who found her. So they have this connection going back all the way back, this very kind of emotional, intense connection between the two of them, and they have this real kind of sizzly, all sorts of things going on, chemistry between them, but they keep finding themselves in these really interesting kind of investigations with the last three books in this series, and I've just really enjoyed how each kind of investigation has been resolved throughout the case, and I kind of throughout the book, and I really like how Joanna Schaffhausen, she kind of leads the like a little bit of a trail for what the next book could be about, and there've been some cliffhangers with a couple of these books that were so good, and this book in particular I really enjoyed because we did have a little bit of an investigation into Reed Markham and his biological mother, as we know from the very start that he's adopted, and in this book we are investigating something that happened to his biological mother when he was a baby, and that was just really interesting. And again, there was just like this chemistry and this tension between him and Ellery, so you have that kind of this really good duo connected with really good just crime investigations and serial killers, and yeah, it's really good, and I really enjoyed this. And it's I think all three of the books in this series have been 5 out of 5 stars for me, and I can't wait for the next one. I'm always just waiting, like gagging for more. By the time I finish each book, I'm just ready for the next one, which is a really good sign. The Winter Crown by Elizabeth Chadwick is a historical fiction book that has been top books of this year so far, and I've always really enjoyed Elizabeth Chadwick's writing. I think she just writes historical fiction really well. She writes women in history really well, and this one in particular is her second book in her trilogy that's all about Eleanor of Aquitaine. The first book was The Summer Queen, and then the third book in this trilogy, which I still have to read, is The Autumn Throne. So this book we are following Eleanor of Aquitaine as basically she is the Queen of England. She is married King Henry, one of the King Henrys, and she has given birth to a few sons, but she wants to go back to Aquitaine because that is one of her like true things that she wants to do. She wants to go back to Aquitaine and rule Aquitaine. She doesn't necessarily want to stay in England and be Queen of England in England, and she's a lot of trouble with her husband, and then her sons are growing up. Her sons were Richard Lionheart and Prince John from like Robin Hood times that you see, and it's just really interesting seeing how she struggled against kind of, I guess, the type of roles that women had to play. Even with the queen, she was kind of used as almost like a broodmare in a way, and it was something she always really didn't want to happen to her, but yet it did kind of happen to her in this book, and the way she fought against it, and just some of the struggles she faced, first from her husband and then from some of her sons, and she still remained a really strong woman. I find her a really interesting historical figure, and I just really love how Elizabeth Chadwick brings her to life. And yeah, she is just a woman who like really just like gives no fucks, and she just is ready to like take what she wants, and I really love that about her. I really enjoyed the Hearth's Invisible Furies this year. I've talked about this briefly, I think, in my mid-year freakout tag, or my mid-year check-in tag, and I really enjoyed this book. It's just so beautifully written. It's so funny. It is about a man who is growing up in Ireland. He is born in the 40s, so he's growing up as a gay man in Ireland at the time when homosexuality was illegal in Ireland and gay people were treated really badly. And we are following him as he grows up, and and as times change in Ireland as well. I really enjoy this book, but again, I've kind of said I'm not really a big fan of the author because of some of his views and some of the things he said before online. So yeah, I do really enjoy this book, but the author is not that nice. The Duchess Deal by Tessa is hands down one of my favourite books of the year so far, and I cannot wait to eventually go on and read more of Tessa books. I really need to do that soon. And this was just so funny. This is about a woman who basically needs to be paid for this wedding dress that she was making, and then the wedding was called off, and she goes to this duke and she's demanding payment for this wedding dress for the wedding that never happened, that was supposed to be his wedding. And he basically proposes to her and says, well, I need to get married and you need a better like living situation. Do you want to marry me? So she ends up saying yes, and they end up getting married. And one of the rules is that he kind of wants to have an heir, so he wants to get her pregnant. There's just a lot of hilarity and a lot of wittiness between, some really, really great dialogue between these two characters, and the way they kind of get to know each other, and how their kind of all their flaws and their loves and stuff are displayed on the table between them, and how they learn it all. It's just so great, and I just really, really enjoy this. I love the fact that we kind of have this little female friendship group as well that we are following in the next few books in this series as well, which I enjoy. But this was just a book that was just so much fun. It was just a pure delight. It made me laugh, and I just really, really love it, and I recommend it to everyone now because I just think, as I said, it was just a pure joy to read. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins has definitely been a Marmite book on BookTube so far, but I have to put it on this list because I just really enjoyed going back to Panem and reading more about the Hunger Games world. I just love learning about the history of the Hunger Games, learning about how it was at the start, the changes that were made, why those changes are made, how it became the Hunger Games that we learned about in Katniss's time, and in Katniss's in the 74th and the 75th Hunger Games. And I just loved all of that. I loved the exploration into Snow's character. I thought it was done really, really well. I just love the fact that even as a teenager he was still this kind of slimy character, and we kind of see where he learns some of the things he does, how he becomes a master game maker, where he learns that from, and how he really, from the time he was young, he was someone who would always take what he wanted no matter who he brought down. And yeah, I just loved it. I just really enjoyed being back in the world. It was pure nostalgia for me as well, but I also thought that some of the things Suzanne Collins did with the book I thought were really clever, and yeah, I just really enjoyed it. Another book I've raved about in the last couple of months has been Don't Touch My Hair by Emma Dabiri. This is definitely one of my favourite non-fiction reads ever. It's one, as I said, I do need to get a physical copy of because it's one I will definitely be rereading soon. And yeah, this is just brilliant. This is a book kind of about, it's basically about this systematic racism, and it's all told through the history of black hair. And it kind of focuses mostly on women's hair, black women's hair, but we do get sections on black men's hair and their relationship with their hair and their relationship with black women's hair as well. And it's just all so interesting. And we are looking at kind of history, we are looking at kind of, I guess, stereotypes of black people. We are like, there's things about mathematics and science and how all this can be brought back and like related back to hair and hairstyles in Africa, particularly Nigeria, which I think is where Emma Dabiri focuses a lot of her when she's looking back into African history. She's looking back a lot of Nigerian traditions and things like that, because I think that is, she would be Irish Nigerian. But it was just so good. It blew my mind. Again, there are things that I think like I really enjoyed reading, but I want to read it again so I can retain more of the knowledge, and it was just so good. I cannot recommend this enough for people who want to read a book about systematic racism, but one that's like maybe a little bit different and told in like a really great way. It's just so good. And then the last book I want to talk about is Us Against You by Fredrik Backman. This is a book, when I reviewed it a while ago, I said I wasn't sure if it was a full 5 stars for me, because at times I felt emotionally manipulated by this book. We are told in certain times in this book we kind of know what's going to happen, and I just felt like my heart was being ripped to pieces throughout this book because I was so afraid for all of my characters. I knew some of them weren't going to make it, and it was just, yeah, it was kind of an emotional roller coaster of a book to read. This is the second book in the Beartown trilogy, and we are following this really small Swedish town where they literally eat, drink and breathe hockey, ice hockey. And this is about, the first book, Beartown, is about a hockey team who look like they're going to win the championship. They have these really great players, and they have like a lot of potential to win this championship, and it will mean really great big things for the town. And then the star hockey player rapes a girl in the town who actually happens to be the general manager of the club's daughter. And it basically ends up with this kind of people who are on his side and people who are on her side, and a lot of ugliness comes out. And the second book, we are following Us Against You. We're kind of following the fallout of a lot of things that happened in Beartown, but we're also following a character who is struggling with his sexuality, and we are following kind of what people think when that eventually comes to light as well. So we do see a little bit of homophobia in this book as well, and we are still seeing some of the same characters struggle with some of the things that they struggled with in the first one. Fredrik Backman is a beautiful writer. He's one of my favourite writers. I've always enjoyed all of his books that I've read. Again, as I said, I felt a little bit emotionally manipulated by this book, but again, it was kind of in a really good way. So it wasn't in a way that I hated, but it was in a way that definitely I felt a little bit ragged by the end, by the time I finished it, but I still really, really enjoyed it. Those are 10 of my favorite books of the year so far. Please let me know if you guys have read any of these books, what you guys thought of them. I would love to know your favorite books of the year so far as well. If you could recommend me any book to read by the end of 2020, what would it be? Please let me know in the comments, and I will see you guys again next time. Bye.